Thanks for taking some time. I think let's just jump right in. I want to hear a little bit about your journey from broadcasting to innovation. How do you make that leap? Because my sense is a lot of people that grew up in the broadcasting world sometimes struggle to extract themselves from it. You seem to have done that with great success. Tell us your secret.
Well, Mike, I think the secret is not taking yourself too seriously up front when you're in broadcasting. So, you get different types of people who broadcast, people who get on radio and it becomes them. They define themselves by the microphone. Sure. And I was never like that. I fell into broadcasting because I put my foot in the door 20 odd years ago. I was fortunate enough to get in, but I've always yearned to start my own business one day. And I've also been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time on talk radio. So that helped mold me. Essentially, it's the advice I give executives, these days. I say to them, if you always have to think about where you're going next. Yes, you're in a great, you're part of a great gig. Yes, you're earning some good money, but at some stage you're going to get sick and tired of it. At some stage you're going to ask yourself, what the hell am I doing with my life? Which is where I got to. And you have to plan for that moment where you eventually take the leap long ahead of schedule. And that's what I've done. What I started doing right at the beginning is I started, interviewing entrepreneurs. The cliched one to go for, of course, is Raymond Ackerman. And I was fortunate enough to sit down with him. And then, eventually you get caught up in the skopskitten donor of talk radio. And eventually I got sick and tired of that. And I said to my team, let's pivot and talk about the good things happening. Let's talk about what's happening in business. Let's talk about the innovators. Let's talk about, all these people doing some good stuff around us because, let's face it, if you're listening to news each and every day, it's easier to get depressed, right? And I wasn't going to lead myself down that rabbit hole. And as we started talking about innovation, talking to amazing people, chatting to VCs, chatting to people like yourself with great insights, that really planted a seed in my brain. And I said to myself a couple of years ago, I'm going to leave this. I want to get out of radio and I want to be Mike Stopforth, right? Huh? So, that is essentially the road that I led myself on. You've got to reinvent who you want to be way before you have to be that person, is essentially the bit of advice that I do give people.
I love that. Sort of building fate runway, right? Absolutely. There's not enough written and spoken about the challenges of professional transition. And I think maybe because it is a relatively new idea. I mean, the world that our parents grew up in was a world where you worked in one career and maybe had 3 or 4 jobs, and the transitions were within one sector and maybe from one big business to another, and you kept your head down and behaved yourself. And whereas today our transitions are not just from one job to another, but sector, geography, culture. There are massive transitions that we go through, and it can be difficult to reinvent oneself through that process. But it's really interesting to watch your journey and how well you've slipped into that new role. So the question I'd love to ask, because I think about this a lot, because innovation is a word I use too in the framework of consulting and in thinking about how organizations respond to digital change. How do you define or think about innovation?
It starts, for me, it's not difficult to think about innovation. When I talk about starting an innovation journey, I sort of don't get involved in all the models and all the other fancy stuff. I start with people around you, right? It's with your eyes and your ears. And it's really understanding how life is lived around you. And innovation is the seed is planted within that. And I've spent years on radio listening to people talking, and you sort of see how real innovators get innovative. They spot a challenge. They end up going, okay, but surely this is not what life should be all about. Surely we can improve this. And they go on that journey of self-discovery, which is very important. So for me, it really is about finding solutions to problems that you see. It's not more complicated than that. And I use a process called effectuation. Right? Not like Cape Flats effectuation, like effectual thinking, right? That's what I'm talking about here. And effectual thinking, I mean, Sarasvati from I think it was Darden coined that, and there's a wonderful book on it, where you start. Obviously, you have to be aware, right? So know what people are doing. Listen actively. Stop talking so much. listen to them. Spot that particular problem. Identify for yourself what you think the problem is going to be. Then what you do, you then look at your own skills, right? What is it that I can do right now? What's my ability right now? What can I do to get started right now? Then I ask myself the question, all right, what's my acceptable loss? Because the last thing you want to worry about is putting money into things and going, oh, shucks, what if I lose my house? What if I lose this? What if I... So to give yourself peace of mind, I think defining your acceptable loss is absolutely essential. And then the third and the most important thing, and this is what certainly gotten me to where I am, and it's still a long way to go, who do I know in my network? And, you know, linear strategy at the moment is BS, quite frankly, because we've got COVID. You've got double exponential growth in technology. You've got people's mindsets that have changed dramatically. I mean, the big resignation and all the rest of it, right?
Sure.
Lots of things are not the way we at least knew them to be. And then once you start chatting to that particular network of yours, and hopefully it's a good network, not just oaks you sat in the corner, you know, drinking beers with, you then start defining what the solution potentially can be. And then, you know, once you've got that initial framework in place, I then go back to design thinking. I love design thinking, not the complicated stuff they teach you at university, because, I mean, they do complicate the living daylights out of you sometimes, but just the simple principles, right? So you've done that problem definition up front. So that's that. You then need to do the empathetic insights. Go and see exactly how people are experiencing it. Why? Look at other people who've had to deal with similar issues. How did they solve it? You know, and once you immerse yourself into that, you then obviously redefine what your particular problem is, and then the rest is obviously history. You start working on the ideation and iterating and all the other fancy stuff until you deploy it. So for me, it starts with awareness, to answer your question, and then that awareness is followed by, that's general awareness, self-awareness, right? Defining your limitations, and then finding really good people around you to help you make things fly. And for the rest of it, it's organized chaos.
Indeed.
So that for me is how I see innovation, and you know, that is how I suggest people deal with it, especially in this new normal of ours.
A lot of the conversation, the narrative around, and even the definitions and case studies around innovation in business, and I guess even in the public sector, are inherited from very kind of US-centric or Eurocentric models or ways of thinking or modes of doing business. Do you think about innovation differently because of our context, or do you think that that's overcomplicating it? You know, how does your thinking change because we're operating in this place with our nuances?
Yeah, you see that nuances everything. Sure. You know, so, you know, I don't know, I tell Toby Shapshak, you know, he's got some really good traits. Some of them. No, I'm just kidding. There's a good friend, you know Toby as well. He did this presentation, I think. You know, he showed this dark continent, and then he showed Europe with all the lights, etc. It's the dark continent where the leapfrog innovations emanate from. The deepest, darkest Africa, right? If you're immersed in an environment where you can't do anything but innovate to improve lives, I think the context from which you see innovation, enact innovation, is very different from, let's say, a European idea of innovation. So let's talk about some of these impact funds. I'm not going to mention any names, right? But you get European innovation, and their innovation is all about, let's do oatmeal masks. Now, that's great. It's cool. It's a very European problem. Go ahead and solve it. In Africa, we've got issues that can cost lives.
Sure.
We've got massive Gini coefficient on the continent. Our country certainly top of the pops when it comes to leading the way.
Well done,
so
us.
How you
First in the world.
so how, you know, we first don't forget about maths and all the rest of it. But that to me is, you know, I'm not saying it's great because people are suffering. For me, it's a great challenge. Yeah. And if you have people who think solutions. Because we should maybe just move away from innovation. I mean, what does innovation really mean? Effectively, it's just finding solutions to problems, finding better solutions, more sustainable solutions, and solutions that in fact impact people's lives. because you also get the innovation where people extract out of society, take their money and hide it in Delaware or Switzerland or whatever. And those are the people I choose not to deal with. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I do think geography and societal makeup, socioeconomic challenges, etc., really frames how you see innovation, and then culture, very important in terms of how you implement that, how you even extract information. So yes, as far as I'm concerned, I do give a damn about geography, and I think it does play a role, and I think we need to own our own innovation. We don't need to take business models from Harvard and MIT, and we can take the good stuff, and then we can go, but hold on, the practical implementation means that sometimes we need to take great frameworks, and it's a bit like studying your postgrad stuff. You can take models, you can bend them, you can do whatever you need to with them, as long as they make sense and you've got throughput at the end of the day that you can measure.
Yeah, somebody shared a metaphor with me the other day on this topic around imagining innovation as a journey. And within the relatively structured, relatively predictable contexts of, let's say, Australasia or the US or the UK, there's this really nicely paved highway with beautiful vistas. There's a little bit of congestion on that. In fact, there's a lot of congestion on the highway, but you're guaranteed to get to a point, and you'll enjoy some views on the way, but you're kind of all going the same way, and that's cool. Whereas our journey, the main road's a little dodgy, so you're encouraged to take some alternative routes. And on those alternative routes, you discover really interesting things. You stumble across a strange little pub or a weird little shop or a beautiful piece of scenery that nobody else has seen before. And I mean, it's an oversimplification of the innovation journey, but the point being is that we get to entertain variables and possibilities that are just not available in a more structured, more rigorous context, more regulated context in some case. Now, both of those have their pros and cons for obvious reasons. And sometimes chaos I'd prefer to have a little less chaos. That would be nice. But it's certainly from a creativity perspective. If creativity is combining data points in different ways to, as you say, find new solutions to problems, then we've got more data points, and that's really great. So it means that potentially the solutions we produce will be will look differently and maybe function differently, and that's pretty exciting, right? And you've created a space for this, haven't you? Your commitment is to literally create the environment for that.
Okay, the location, Mike, it's in Kloof Street in Cape Town, the old Long Kloof buildings. The whole building used to be run by Travel Start. Innovation City is taking over 75% of that building. The reason and how we got to this, I was approached in October last year by a very good friend of mine, Stefan Egberg, who also happens to be the founder of Travel Start. And he had just returned from Stockholm and said, imagine we could get people to collaborate. It took me one conversation with him. I resigned from II, the tech firm I worked with, and I said, I'm doing this. Because talk about finding something that you're really passionate about, that you've always been wanting to do, right? I found it. Yeah. And it was a bit of a leap of faith, because you work at a tech company, the salaries aren't shabby, and it's nice and comfortable. Sure. But the one thing about working with a tech firm is trying to herd engineers around strategy was challenging enough for me to want to take on another challenge. and
absolutely.
Here we have it. About 3,000 functional square meters, right? The whole idea is to bring together startups. We already have Launch Africa that have moved in, a $25 million US dollar fund. We've got some other announcements, a massive fund, but we can't talk about that right now. We've been chatting to some massive corporates. So the whole idea is to get in the corporates, to get in the funders, to get in the scale-ups, the startups, people with great digital skills, and also to start building a pipeline of digital skills. Because as we all know, we don't have enough digital skills in this country. And it's great that Amazon's arrived here. It's great that Google's around. But what a lot of these companies do, and I can talk about this from a tech firm's perspective, is they just take all the talent. And you're chasing your tail, and you've got developer inflation and all those sort of things. And that's really knocked a whole lot of dev firms quite hard. So we're also looking to develop, this is obviously a medium to long term play, the necessary skill sets in line with market needs. We're not just going to teach you Ruby on Rails. I found out Ruby on Rails actually wasn't some drunk person who stumbled onto the tracks the other day.
A Beatles song.
Yeah, and it's not just about, hey, we're going to do PHP, we're going to do all of this. No. We're going to understand what industry need looks like within our context and then start developing that. We've been chatting to MIT CSAIL with their managing director, chatting to UJ Center for Intelligent Systems to also create an enabling environment around MVPs, POCs, etc., because those things are also very expensive. So that's it in a nutshell, really. Getting, all people who think alike to get together, to collaborate, and accelerate innovation is essentially what we want to do.
Amazing. And I think that notion of cross-sectoral collaboration is critical as well. We can't really see innovation through one lens. We need the buy-in of big business. We need public sector support. We need the funders, as you said. And then obviously we need the innovators and entrepreneurs that are the catalysts. But a bit of a dead-end street if there's no fertile soil for that kind of activity, right?
Exactly.
Your other project, linked or separate, the high school, talk me through this really fascinating new initiative. I mean, education is really kind of key to something that I care deeply about and am invested in. Tell me about that project.
Wow. The Valencia Institute. The thing about retiring and sort of finally cutting ties with something you've done for almost 3 decades, you sometimes think, great, I'm going to relax now and I can do a little dev thing. And, literally so a couple of weeks into that, and I want to talk about networks a bit later, but I mean, this is everything I've achieved is as a result of trust relationships that I've built over not just a year or two, but over many years.
Yeah.
I remember driving back from the mall with my wife, with my slops and my shorts, and just having a lekker time, and I get this phone call from someone else who I've befriended, Rob Paddock. And Rob's like, Kieno, how's it? And how's it, Rob? Been a long time. And he says to me, listen, I can't talk about this right now, but we're launching UCT Online High School. I've always wanted to do work with you. Can we chat about it at some stage? I said, yeah, sure. And I was all excited about it because I'm passionate about education. We had this chat and he was talking to me about this concept of UCT Online High School. He then said, listen, I'm not sure what you're going to do, but something like head of culture sounds good. I said, damn, I'll take any title. If I get to work with you, I'll happily do that. I'm still trying to figure out.
It's difficult not to be infused with enthusiasm around the Paddock brothers, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, man, I love them. Yeah. Sam and Rob, I mean, absolute legends, right? And Valencia Institute obviously emanated out of Get Smarter and them selling it to 2U and all the rest of it. And obviously Sam's gone on to do some amazing stuff in the fitness arena. I did try it, Sam. Yes. I do apologize. I lasted a week, I think it was. But with Rob, it was interesting. Education is something I'm very passionate about. I've always been very contrarian when it comes to high school, the way we teach, the need to go to university. I mean, I sit on the board of a university, but I'm still saying to people, not every kid needs to go to university. The biggest problem they should be sitting with at the end of matric is their little business they've started and how they're going to find time to study further and do further education. Education and further education is another story. But anyway, getting back to UCT Online High School, they've got such a great learning model, right, where you are supported all the way. So, first and foremost, the teaching or the education itself is pre-recorded, but it was purpose-built from the ground up. Very interactive. The fact that we are limbic beings before we become these sort of prefrontal beings is something that's top of mind as well. And if you understand that kids and their limbic system is much more developed than, and some people only develop that at 40. The prefrontal cortex side of things. And if you appeal to the limbic system and then help build the logical side of the brain, you really get much better understanding and a much better outcome at the end of the day. And that's really
like
what they do.
Exercising a muscle, right? Yeah.
Exactly right. So what they do is it's interactive. The best teachers in terms of teaching, deliver those classes. I did say they're very interactive. Storytelling's a big thing as well. And then you've got this learning model that surrounds that. You've got teachers. Now, in a traditional school, a teacher has to put together the lecture or put together the learning for the day or the teaching for the day. And they've got a mark. They've got to be 5 or 6 different things. And then, oh yes, by the way, they still have to pay some attention to the kids. So not very effective in your traditional schools.
Yeah,
but at UCT Online High School in Valencia, those teachers, the only thing they do, it's all data driven, right? Because everybody's online. As soon as they pick up a challenge with one child or a group of kids, what they do is they do one-on-one sessions to assist them or group sessions to assist. It's also mastery-based education, so you can't move from block 1 to block 2 unless you've mastered block 1. Because we all know what it's like. By the time you get to the end of mathematics in grade 10, you're like, what the hell did I just study? I can't remember any of the stuff. So mastery-based education is very good. They've got support coaches that help them as well. So a support coach will help you. So it's determined, and because it's digital, I mean, you'll understand this. We can determine the pace at which each child has to learn. We give them a suggested timetable, what they should be learning when. If they're stronger in maths, they probably spend less time, spend more time on geography or whatever it is. But they're stumbling blocks. And what that support coach does is really assist you. If I want to take if I need to go and do skateboarding in China, and I'm not going to be there for a week, it's the support coach that assists you with, reconfiguring what you do. And there's also, people that assist from a psychosocial perspective, because if you're not in a good headspace, how do you learn? And it's that type of learning model that really is effective. It's not like homeschooling where the parents have to do everything. Parents and guardians are kept in the loop all the time. We have guardian assemblies. We've got assemblies for young people. The other day we had DJ Black Coffee on. I mean, our school song was put together by Good Luck, Youngster. I mean, a whole lot of really, really good artists put the school song together. And
not
it's also
some
about
operatic colonial tune.
Have you heard it?
No, I haven't yet. Actually, I'll look it up.
It's very, very, very South African and African, I think.
Cool.
It's absolutely. Hopefully, it actually gets up on the charts. I mean, that's what we want to achieve.
That'd be amazing.
But you've got all of the support. It's in a virtual environment, but we don't leave it there. We've got societies that they can join. They're get-togethers between different grades, but physical get-togethers. You can play sports together. You can do coding. You can do cartooning. You can do a whole host of things. If you're into cooking, you can do that as well. So it really is an amazing, amazing model. And I've heard people complain about it, but it's because they compare. And I mean, there was one professor in particular who complained about this, but she was comparing apples with like grapefruit, right?
Well, no new innovation, no brave attempt at a new solution will ever be perfect on the first iteration, right? So,
absolutely.
And I think an expectation of that is unrealistic at best, and also damaging potentially to the stakeholders. But one of the advantages of a predominantly online ecosystem like that is its replicability. It's how easy it is to copy and roll out in other circumstances, and that's exactly what we need, right? We need highly adaptive systems on top of academic rigor, and which is arguably the oldest and most staid architecture in the world. And I think the blend of those two is extraordinarily powerful. So, I mean, I think UCT need to be commended for that bravery. That is a courageous move. But really excited to hear what you guys are achieving. And I mean, if ever there was a space that needed innovation and needed reinvention, it would be our education system, right? Like, you fix that and you fix a lot of other problems.
Absolutely, Mike. If I can just add one thing to this, right? Yes, it's and I'm not in some PR campaign. I just love what is being done at the school, but also in your poorer areas where we know young people don't have access to stable internet. Walking to school, catching buses, etc. Massive issue. We actually have centers that we develop in partnership with other people, where you've got someone who's there to monitor what young people are doing, to assist them, stable internet, etc. So it is important, so important for us to look at inclusive education when it comes to this. We're working with corporates now to, assist with sponsorship as well, because even just over 2,000 Rand is a lot of money for some people in this country. But those kids deserve decent education. And I always make jokes about the Stellenbosch Mafia and whatever. And, and even if you look at where VCs put their money, they put their money in 6 or 7 geographies around the world, right? And the assumption is that is where all the brilliance lies. And to your point earlier about, living in a different type of environment, some of the most brilliant people live in townships, live on the Cape Flats, live in areas that are underserved. And it's everybody's duty to find them and help make them shine.
Yeah, your commitment to that and passion for it really is encouraging. It's good to see that people are applying business and technology learnings, lessons, tools, platforms to what, we could debate is probably our biggest challenge. So listeners will know that my favorite 2 questions to ask normally come at this part of the show, and I think I primed you for them, which means I gave you an unfair advantage over most people that I normally just throw. Oh, did
I was
you not
kind of
listen to
hoping
my
you
voice
didn't,
notes?
by the way.
Well, good. Then they're going to be fresh. But the 2 questions I love to ask, and the one is kind of a direct follow-on from what we've just discussed. But if you could introduce a book or a published work as a compulsory reading topic for young South Africans in their school career, if you could put a book into the high school system and insist that everybody reads it, what book would you insist that they put into the system? Oh, well, there we go. That was easy. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Frog.
Absolutely. I'll talk through that very quickly.
Yeah.
Because, Mark Manson basically says, we're all fallible beings, right?
Yeah.
The sooner you start realizing what your blinking shortcomings are, right, and you own those. You can work on them, of course, that's important.
Yeah.
And you also understand what your strengths are.
Yeah.
Then you can just get on to the business of just doing things. And we all worry about all sorts of crap around us all the time. And literally, we should all have a few F's, right, that we do give. But you can't give an F about everything. So you need to choose the battles you fight. And I think this book really sets, and it gives you a deep dive into real stories and how people have actually managed to master that. And that's why I love that book.
I must confess I've not read it, but perhaps I need to add it to the pile next to the bed. And then the second question is almost an extension of that. If you could go back in time to 18-year-old Kieno and whisper a single sentence of advice to him, what would you tell young Kieno?
I would tell him, have a little bit more confidence in your ability, because I was very much of an introvert and always worried about what everybody thought about me, and it limited me. And I would have also told myself what I tell my 19-year-old today: go out there and go and stuff things up, go and learn, because your best one of the best education, or the best bit of education you can certainly create for yourself, is by making those mistakes and learning from them. And you're 47, I'm 47, I leave a cushy sort of environment, and now I'm busy trying to make the mistakes and sort of create this life that I really aspire to. I should have done that a long time ago. And it helps you program the brain, for the future as well.
He or she who dies with the most memories wins, right?
Yeah. Life's a book. Yeah. Every month is a chapter. You've got to write the damn chapter. Make it memorable.
My friend, thanks for your work. Thanks for your passion. Thanks for your commitment to innovation. We know how critical it is. And thanks for doing the work that I think many are not courageous enough to step out and try. And there's a lot to be learned, I think, from your transition professionally. I'd love to maybe chat to you more about that at one stage. I could certainly learn a lot from that. And there's many who I think are trying to master that journey. So look after yourself, and I hope to catch up with you for a coffee or a beer in Cape Town.
I'd love that, Mike. And listen, I still remember when you addressed us at Prime Media, and I was listening and hanging on to all of those words. So people like you inspired me as well. Thank you.
Cool, man. Chat to you soon.
Okay. Nice one, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.